Hi there, this is Judith O'Dea from the original Night of the Living Dead, speaking to you from the Graveyard Show.
Welcome to the Graveyard.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I am your caretaker, and the graveyard is open.
Do you remember one time when we were small, we were out here? It was from right over there. I jumped out at you from behind the tree, and Grandpa got all excited, and he shook his fist at me, and he said, "Boy, you be damned to hell." Remember that? Right over there. Well, you used to really be scared here.
Johnny.
You're still afraid.
Stop it now, I mean it.
They're coming to get you, Barbra.
Stop it. You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbra.
Stop it. You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
He'll hear you.
Here he comes now. I'm getting out of here.
Johnny. Oh, no!
Indeed, they were coming to get her. And that's how Night of the Living Dead, the classic horror film, opened. And that's how a genre was redefined with that one film in that one moment. Well, you heard her at the top of the show, and she is here, and I am thrilled. Judith O'Dea, who played Barbra in the original Night of the Living Dead, is going to be here. The interview about Night of the Living Dead that I've had sitting on my hard drive for way too long, about 10 years or so. So timely this is not, but thankfully this is what we call an evergreen interview. And whenever you hear the term evergreen, a little peek behind the curtain, it just means that it's an interview that doesn't have to be timely. And what's crazy is that when Judith first came on the show, we were just celebrating the 40th anniversary of Night of the Living Dead, and now here I am finally getting it online and heard by people for the first time. And now it's past the 50th anniversary, which is just insane. So basically, I'll give you a little backdrop as to how all this came to be. First of all, I have to thank Lonnie Martin, who's a writer-director. He and his wife, Cindy Martin, who was on my last show as Helena, the Hussy of Horror. She starred, and I believe she and Lonnie may have co-written, or Lonnie wrote it, I don't remember. But Lonnie directed a film that they did called Women's Studies. And Lonnie was coming on my show to promote the film when it was coming out, and he told me that he was going to see about getting Judith O'Dea to join him on the interview because she had a co-starring role in the film. And he was able to do it, and I interviewed the two of them, which I did upload as a Graveyard Show podcast. And when we were done, I just asked Miss O'Dea if she wouldn't mind sticking around for just a little bit to record separately an interview about Night of the Living Dead. And she was gracious, and she said no problem, and we did it, and here it is. Originally, I was going to try to package this interview with an interview with George Romero about Night of the Living Dead. I had some friends trying to contact Mr. Romero about coming on the show, and unfortunately, it just didn't work out. So around mid-2010, I just stopped doing the show. There was just far too much going on in my personal life that I needed to take care of, and podcasting was the very last thing I needed to do. So I stopped doing the show. The website that I had for my show went away, and when that went away, so did all the shows, because iTunes and all the other podcasting sites were linked to that, and the Graveyard Show podcast basically ceased to exist. And over the course of several years, I would meet people and talk to friends and say, oh, I had this show, and it was a podcast, and they would always inevitably say, well, where can I find it? And I would say, well, you can, because it doesn't exist online. And that kind of bugged me because, you know, there was a lot of hard work put into this program, and to not have it out there, I just thought was kind of silly. So here, 10 years later, I thought, well, you know what? I have this interview that I never uploaded, and the show doesn't exist, so why not just package it up and just start doing it that way? So thus, the Graveyard Show podcast Take 2 began, and what I am now calling the Tombstone editions. Although this is an original, because this interview never aired originally. So I had to get the gang back together again. I had to call up my grave diggers to come on back inside the graveyard and get ready to go to work. And work they are going to do, because as you hear in the background, the grave diggers are hard at work getting a new grave dug. And that is for my guest this show. She was Barbra in the original Night of the Living Dead. Judith O'Dea is here inside the graveyard. Stick around afterwards. We'll talk a little horror. I'll see you on the other side. Enjoy. So, Miss O'Dea, Night of the Living Dead, the script, how did you get the script for this particular film?
I don't think I ever really got a full script, because the script really evolved as we were doing it. I might have gotten scenes, but I cannot now remember whether I ever had a full script.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did get was, I was in Hollywood at the time, trying to make my way there. Got a call from Carl Hardman, who plays Harry Cooper in the film, who said, "Why don't you come on back and we're going to make a film. Why don't you audition for it?" So that's how it all came about. But there was never a full script in my hand from the very beginning.
Was it, because I'm sure, especially at that time, I mean, you know, here's this movie about, you know, zombies, you know, eating people. Was it something that, I mean, were you a fan of horror? Was horror interesting to you, or was this more, you know what, there's a job, I'm going to take it and I'll do it?
I was making my living in musical theater, wonderful musical comedy, musical theater. Horror was as far away from that as could be. But the thought of having an opportunity to work in a feature film, a full-length feature film, as an actor was a tremendously exciting opportunity. That it was horror didn't make any difference in the world to me. It was the fact that here was an opportunity to expand my experience and my craft. I was really very excited about it.
Now, the character of Barbra is an interesting character because she comes off originally, when you see her, she comes across as helpless, and by the end of the film, she's fighting back. She's fighting for her life. She's helping everybody, you know, survive at the end. Was it? Did you find that was a redeeming factor for Barbra, and certainly, you know, for a woman character that was so prominently shown in this horror movie?
I never thought of Barbra as being weak. Even from the beginning, I saw her as a woman who was shocked at something she couldn't understand. I also saw her as a woman, as a human being who would certainly try to save her own life by running away from something that was horrific. I saw her grow. She needed to do what she did by going inside herself. That only made her realize, I have to come back and I have to do something to help the people I've been with over the last night. So to me, she was never weak. She did what made sense, I felt, to the character.
Was it difficult to play sort of this subdued, because it really does extend for quite a long period of time in the film? Was it hard to keep that, to sustain that?
The wonderful thing about working with George Romero is that he was able to tell you at the beginning of each scene what it is that we were trying to achieve, but I think he also had the whole story in mind, and he also had all those scenes that we had done before, so he was tying everything together. He was able to help you sustain the emotion and the feelings, even though scenes, of course, are so broken up when they're filmed. Mm-hmm. So that was a tremendous help. You're right. It's a challenge to be that quiet and that internal for so long. It gave me a wonderful opportunity to talk in my own head, so that what you saw on the outside was appropriate for the moment. It was a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Back in those days, the films were shot with 16 millimeter. So, shooting this low budget horror movie in black and white, I mean, just I miss 16 millimeter. What was that like? It was a small crew. You're in this house. I mean, what was that experience like working with these filmmakers and these other actors? I would assume there was a camaraderie that would have been formed.
Oh, a tremendous camaraderie, because many of us had worked together in other areas of entertainment. I had worked with Marilyn Eastman and Carl Hardman doing commercials and voiceover work. That's how I really got my chance to audition for the film. You become a family on a set, sometimes more dysfunctional than others, but it's a wonderful family. It was the house also played a part of the family. It was a part of the family. And I tell you what, that house was incredible. The coldness of it, the feel to it was so perfect for what we were shooting that it unto itself was the character in the film. Mm-hmm. We all really spent a great deal of time in that house. We lived in it, we slept in it, and we shot 24 hours a day oftentimes, in the night to night, day for day. It's an exciting experience to be so intense mm-hmm. for that period of time.
Speaking of shooting night for night, can you talk about what it's like working overnights and especially, again, sustaining that level of intensity? Is it hard acting, being an actor working night for night, doing, the 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. shoot?
When you know that's what you have to do, you put your mind where it has to be in order to accomplish it. Therefore, no, it isn't. Mm-hmm. I don't think it is. Even at my age, I don't think it is. And I'm thinking of some of the shoots I've done over the last few years, and we've done a lot of night-for-night shooting. There is so much energy on the set that it's like a great, big, wonderful dose of espresso. Mm-hmm. It just keeps you going, and it keeps you on a wonderful, wonderful high. Even when you're not in the scene, I always am right there watching what's going on. That in itself helps you maintain your own involvement in what comes next, mm-hmm. something that you may be involved in.
You have one of the most physical, memorable sequences in any horror movie. I mean, when I think of, physicality, that open when you were running from the zombie, running to the car, running out of the car, running down the hill, falling several times, finding the house. I mean, when I think of things like that, I think of like the old Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee fights in like the Dracula, Frankenstein movies. Was that one of those sequences that did it take a physical toll on you? Because I mean, you were doing it yourself.
Oh yeah.
And you took some pretty hard falls.
In fact, the very first fall that you see was, I slipped and fell. That certainly wasn't written into the script, but it lended itself very well to what we were doing. I've been very fortunate in my life to be extremely athletic. I love involvement in all kinds of sports. So being able to do the physical things that were required was something I really, really enjoyed. I can remember the very first shot we did in the film was running through the woods when you see the trees and the leaves. Mm-hmm. And how exciting that was to be able to be that physical.
Because zombies were still so new at this stage of the game, and certainly they would be, completely rewritten by the master, George Romero. Was it one of those things where it was kind of like, were there dead people walking around outside? Really? I mean, was it really as believable for you as possible? Was it eerie? Was it,
I have a tremendous imagination. I've had it since I was a kid. So when somebody puts forth, this is it, this is what's happening, this is the reality you're in, I just sort of slip right in there. This is what's happening. So it wasn't the kind of thing that in the back of my head I was saying, oh God, isn't this ridiculous? No, you just slip right into maybe it could happen. And if it could, then how the heck do you handle something like that? It didn't bother me at all. I just jumped right into the story.
What was it like working with Duane Jones?
Duane, the word that comes to my mind is intellect. Depth and intellect. Duane was just so well read, such an educated fellow, such a sensitive man, that it was wonderfully exciting to work with somebody who has so much in his head as well as his heart and emotion. We got on very well. We didn't chum around a lot. He was older than I, but I thought we were able to work quite well together because we both had an intensity, if I can use that word, an intensity about what we were doing.
Were all of you aware of what a cinematic moment it was to have a black male as a lead in a film, especially 1968? Were all of you aware of like the social significance that Romero was putting into this film, or was it one of those things that, since you weren't getting a full script, that it didn't really kind of hit everybody until after the fact?
I can only speak for myself. Therefore, it didn't hit me that this was a momentous occasion in a film. It just hit me that Duane was selected for the role. It didn't really matter that he was a black fellow to me, because at that time in my life, and all through my life really, color hasn't made any difference to me. It's the person that lives behind the color that really makes the difference. It always has. Therefore, I didn't think, oh my Lord, aren't we making something momentous using a black man and a white woman? Never even occurred to me. It'd be interesting to hear what other people who are still alive from the film would say to that.
Yeah. Well, the film gets done. It comes out. Well, actually, before I get to that, is it true that the opening sequence of the film was the last to be shot?
No, actually, we did a lot of the opening in the very... Well, I take that back. When I was on set, we did the scenes from the beginning of the film.
Okay.
We actually just moved through. We didn't go from the end to the beginning to the middle. It really, as I recall, was quite sequential.
Okay.
For me.
And,
I don't know what it was for everybody else.
Yeah, and then because I had read somewhere that that did you have to be careful with your breathing because it was being shot in the fall and it was supposed to be in the spring?
Well, when we did the pickups,
yeah,
we had to do some pickups. In fact, when I fell that first fall, it was heat of summer, and boy, it was hot. I think it was July or August, and we had to come back to make that the sequence of shots make sense. I had to kick off my other shoe. So that fall was staged. Therefore, you're right. If you got too intense and it was chilly out, we did have to watch. I can recall, I don't think anybody held breath.
Yeah.
but we were aware that it was fall, and you had to watch it a bit.
Does it surprise you that here we are, 40 years later, and that the film still has the same impact that it did 40 years ago when it opened in drive-ins?
It blows my mind. I am every day constantly amazed, awed, and really extremely grateful.
Have you ever thought about maybe coming back and doing one of George's zombie movies just as a cameo, as to go back?
Well, I would love to do that, but what I want really doesn't matter. Is what George is willing and wants, and at least up to this point in time, he hasn't quite wanted to bring me back.
Well, maybe we'll have to change his mind on that one.
Well, good. You do that.
I'm on that right now. Miss O'Dea, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about Night of the Living Dead. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed our conversation.
That was a real honor. Night of the Living Dead has a real special place in my heart. It is a film that inspired me when I was starting to write my short stories and when I was starting to do short projects in film school. And it was very much a part of, it was very much an influence for me. And I even wrote critical essays on Night of the Living Dead. And it was funny because, people, I'm sure you experience this as well when you tell people that you're a fan of horror movies. Inevitably, they say, oh, what are your favorite horror movies? And I just kind of throw movies out and just kind of go, okay, here they are. And, going into this, I really kind of thought about it. And the top three for me, in this order probably, is Jaws, Halloween, and Night of the Living Dead. Although thinking about it, with Night of the Living Dead, I was kind of obsessed with that movie. So maybe Night of the Living Dead is number 2. Certainly Jaws is 1. I'm crazy obsessed with Jaws. So maybe Night of the Living Dead is 2 and Halloween's 3. So getting Judith O'Dea to come on and talk about the film was really special and certainly memorable. And Lonnie, thank you again for one of those rare opportunities to do something like that, to get that kind of interview. I really appreciate it. And if you're listening, or if Cindy's listening, I hope you both are doing really well. Night of the Living Dead is one of those movies that it's not Halloween until I actually watch that film. If you're one of the people out there that have not seen the film yet, listen, it's a first time for everything, so definitely check it out. Obviously, I'm going to recommend the one and definitive edition of the film, which is the Criterion Collection. It has everything. It's just beautifully done. The remaster is fantastic. And I just think that it'll be worth your time to watch that. The film itself is public domain, so you're going to see all different types of versions and Blu-ray editions. And I've read how a lot of these releases are just garbage. And I refuse to watch I think it was the 25th or 30th anniversary where John Russo came back and they added scenes to the original and it was like a prequel. I won't do it. It's either the original or not. And I thought Savini's version was not bad, but that's for another day. The original for me is the one and only. So I can't recommend the Criterion Collection version of that enough. And also, if you get Turner Classic Movies, Night of the Living Dead is going to be shown, I believe, one of the Thursday nights. They're doing Thursday night horror, they're doing Friday night Godzilla, and so they're doing some other stuff. So if you get Turner Classic Movies and you don't normally watch it, go on their website. It's tcm.com and follow their schedule. Great stuff going to be on there, including Night of the Living Dead. So, the Graveyard Show podcast is on YouTube. I have several different playlists on there, and you can find the show as a podcast on iTunes, Podomatic, Anchor, and basically anywhere podcasts are found. You can find the Graveyard Show podcast. There is no social media site for the show. There is no website for the show, but there is an email address. So if you'd like to email me, you can reach me at gyspodcast@gmail.com. gyspodcast@gmail.com. That's G as in grave, Y as in yard, S as in show. gyspodcast@gmail.com. As always, you can leave comments on the appropriate sites as well. I always look forward to hearing from you. It was great having you visit again. I always look forward to having you here with me. And, of course, if you know any fans of horror, please send them this way. New visitors and friends are always welcome. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for me here. And I hope all of you out there have an awesome Halloween, have an awesome October. Have a lot of fun. Please be safe out there. I want each and every one of you to return back inside the graveyard in November. And as you exit the graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Happy Halloween.